There is a conversation that happens in the minds of men who have done everything they were told to do, who showed up consistently, who were considerate, patient, emotionally available, supportive, kind, who listened more than they spoke and asked more than they demanded and gave more than they withheld, who modeled themselves, consciously or not, on every instruction the culture offered about what a woman wants in a man, and who then watched, with a confusion that curdled slowly into something more bitter, as the women they wanted chose someone else, someone who, by every available metric of the instructions they had followed, should have been a worse option, someone who was less accommodating, less emotionally transparent, less relentlessly focused on her comfort and approval, someone who had edges where they had smoothed everything to softness, someone who occupied space in a way that felt, from the outside, almost aggressive in its completeness, someone who, by the logic of everything the nice guy had been told, should have finished last. This is not a video about what women want, in the reductive sense that phrase usually carries. It is not a formula or a tactic or a collection of behaviors to perform in order to generate a specific response. The man who approaches it looking for those things will find something more uncomfortable and more useful. An explanation, not of female psychology in isolation, but of the dynamic that actually operates beneath the surface of attraction, which is a dynamic that has everything to do with what a man is in his totality, and almost nothing to do with how carefully he has managed his presentation of himself. Carl Jung spent decades studying the deepest architecture of the human psyche. He was interested in the layers that operate beneath conscious awareness, the patterns that run regardless of intention, the forces that shape human behavior and human attraction in ways that conscious preferences and stated values do not fully account for and cannot fully override. And what he found, in the specific territory of masculine development and intimate attraction, was a set of principles so consistent across cultures and historical periods that he concluded they were not cultural constructs but structural features of the human psyche itself, features that the nice guy may, through the very completeness of his niceness, manages to work directly against. What she sees in the dark is not something sinister. It is something real. It is the full weight of a man who has met himself honestly and integrated what he found. And what it sees when it looks at the nice guy beneath the consideration and the agreeableness and the relentless accommodation is the shape of a man who has not done that work, who has not met himself, who has built a surface so carefully managed that there is no detectable depth beneath it, and whose absence of depth registers not as goodness, but as the specific kind of vacancy that the deepest human instincts recognize and cannot choose. This is not comfortable material. It is not designed to be. If you are ready to understand what is actually operating beneath the dynamic that has confused and frustrated you, if you are serious about the kind of masculine development that requires honest self-examination rather than strategic performance adjustment, subscribe. This channel exists for the man who wants to understand what is real rather than feel better about what isn't working. The anima, what Jung was actually describing. To understand why the nice guy fails at the level Jung was examining, you first need to understand what Jung meant by the anima. He used the term to describe the unconscious feminine dimension of the male psyche, not femininity in the social or cultural sense, not a set of behaviors or preferences or aesthetic orientations, but something more fundamental than that. The anima, in Jung's framework, is the contrasexual depth of a man's interior life. It is the emotional intelligence that lives in the unconscious of men who have been socialized to suppress it. It is the relational, receptive, intuitive dimension of human experience that the masculine persona tends to leave undeveloped. And it is, crucially, the part of the male psyche that projects itself outward onto real women, charging them with a significance and a power that belongs, at its source, to the man's own interior life and not to the woman receiving the projection. When a man falls in love, or what he experiences as falling in love, he is always partly falling into a projection of his own anima. He is encountering qualities in the woman in front of him that resonate with the unconscious feminine dimension of his own psyche. And that resonance produces an experience of almost numinous recognition, the feeling of finally finding something he did not know he was looking for. This is not cynicism about love. It is an honest description of one of the mechanisms through which the deepest human attractions are generated. And understanding it is critical to understanding what the nice guy consistently gets wrong. The nice guy, almost without exception, is a man whose anima is undeveloped and largely unconscious. He has not made contact with his own emotional depth, his own intuitive intelligence, his own capacity for genuine feeling that runs beneath the performed sensitivity he offers as a substitute for the real thing. And because he has not developed it internally, he carries it as a projection. He is not simply interested in the woman in front of him, so he is captivated by her in a way that has a quality of compulsion, of something beyond ordinary preference, because she is carrying in his projective experience of her the entire weight of his own unmet interior life. She has become, without either of their awareness, the vessel for everything he has not yet found within himself. This dynamic produces something that destroys attraction with extraordinary reliability. It produces idealization. It produces a quality of seeing the woman not as she actually is, with her own complexity and her own contradictions and her own ordinariness, but as she appears through the filter of the projection, as more than human, as the answer to something, as the carrier of a significance that no actual human being can sustain under the pressure of daily reality. And it produces, on the other side of the projection, the specific experience of being seen not as a person, but as a symbol, of being related to not as an actual woman, but as the image of something in the man's internal world. And that experience, whatever the man intends, does not feel like being loved. It feels like being used as a screen, like the man is not seeing you at all, and in a very precise sense, he isn't. Why the shadow is the real story. Here is the dimension of Jungian psychology that most discussions of this topic miss entirely, and it is the dimension that carries the most practical weight. The nice guy's problem is not primarily about the anima, though the anima dynamics are real and important. The nice guy's problem is his shadow. More specifically, it is the relationship he has to his shadow, which is not a relationship at all. It is a suppression, a denial, a sustained, organized refusal to acknowledge the parts of himself that do not fit the persona of the accommodating, agreeable, carefully inoffensive man he has decided he must be in order to be acceptable. We established in previous videos what the shadow contains, everything excluded from the persona, and the nice guy's persona excludes an enormous amount. It excludes genuine aggression, the forward-pressing energy of a man who knows what he wants and moves toward it without continuously checking whether the movement is inconveniencing someone. It excludes authentic selfishness, the healthy kind that allows a man to have genuine preferences and genuine priorities that he pursues without constant apologetic negotiation. It excludes the willingness to create discomfort in service of what is true or what matters, the capacity to disappoint, to refuse, to challenge, to say something that disrupts rather than something that soothes. It excludes the full range of desire expressed without the management and the hedging and the apologetic tentativeness that converts desire from something alive and compelling into something that feels like a request for permission. It excludes, most fundamentally, the quality that all of these things together constitute when they are integrated into a man's conscious life. Genuine presence. The unmistakable sense that there is a complete human being here, but with real weight and real edges and a real interior that has not been edited for comfort. And here is the mechanism Jung identified that makes the shadow's suppression so directly relevant to attraction. The shadow does not disappear when it is denied. It does not politely absent itself from the personality when the persona decides it is not welcome. It goes underground. And from underground, it continues to express itself, but indirectly, through the unconscious behavior patterns that give a man his particular texture and flavor as a person. The integrated shadow, the one that has been brought into conscious relationship through the painful and honest work of self-examination, expresses itself as depth, as substance, as the quality that makes a person feel genuinely three-dimensional, genuinely complex, genuinely complete in a way that you cannot quite explain but can absolutely perceive. The suppressed shadow, the one that has been walled off and denied and organized against, expresses itself as its absence, as flatness, as the quality that makes a person feel somehow less than the full volume of a human being, however pleasant they may be to interact with. Women in Jung's framework do not consciously perceive the shadow and consciously decide to be attracted to it. The mechanism is not that deliberate or that explicit. What happens is something more fundamental and more reliable than conscious evaluation. The deepest structures of human attraction respond to completeness, to the full dimensional weight of a genuine person, to the specific signature that only a man who has met himself honestly and integrated what he found actually generates. And those deep structures are essentially indifferent to niceness, in the managed, suppressed, carefully inoffensive sense of the word, because niceness of that kind is not completeness. It is a portion of a man performing as though it were the whole. The flatness she cannot name. There is an experience that women who have been involved with nice guys, or who have tried to be, describe with remarkable consistency. They cannot always articulate it precisely because it operates beneath the level of conscious evaluation and resists the kind of clear naming that conscious evaluation allows. But the experience itself is consistent. It is the experience of something missing, of reaching for something in the relationship or in the man and not finding it. Not finding what, exactly? They often cannot say. The man is kind, he is present, he does all the things he is supposed to do, and yet something is not there, something that she feels the absence of without being able to fully account for the absence or justify the feeling it produces, because by every explicit measure, this man is giving her what she said she wanted, and yet the wanting is not satisfied, and the dissatisfaction produces guilt, because there is no obvious reason for it, and the guilt makes it harder to name honestly, and the naming becomes harder still, and eventually the relationship either continues with a persistent low-level flatness that neither person fully addresses, or it ends in a way that leaves the nice guy bewildered and in pain, genuinely unable to understand what he did wrong. What she was reaching for and not finding is what Jung would have called genuine encounter, the experience of making actual contact with a complete human being, of meeting real resistance, real substance, real otherness, the quality of encountering someone whose interior life is genuinely different from the reflection of your own that an accommodating person provides. Because the nice guy, through the completeness of his accommodation, has essentially removed himself from the equation. He has made himself into a mirror, agreeing with, supporting, reflecting back whatever she brings, adjusting continuously to her preferences and her moods and her implicit expectations. And a mirror is not a person. A mirror provides no genuine encounter, and genuine encounter, which requires a genuine person on the other side, with genuine weight and genuine edges and genuine presence that is not shaped around the other person's comfort, is one of the things the deepest human structures recognize and require, and cannot be fooled into experiencing by a performance that resembles it from the outside. There is a term in Jung's work for this kind of flatness in a man: anima possession. The man who has not developed a conscious relationship with his own anima, who has not met the feminine dimension of his own psyche honestly and integrated it, tends to be possessed by it rather than in relationship with it. He is unconsciously driven by the anima's qualities, by emotional need and relational hunger, and the compulsive need for approval and connection, while simultaneously being unable to express those qualities with any genuine depth or authenticity because he has never made honest contact with their source. He performs sensitivity without genuine emotional intelligence. He performs care without genuine presence. He performs availability without genuine rootedness. And the performance, however sustained, communicates something that the person receiving it cannot help but register, that the man who is performing so carefully is not actually there, that the genuine person, the one with real weight and real shadow and real edges and real depth, has been kept somewhere else, somewhere safer, somewhere the performance cannot reach him and cannot be reached. The paradox of manufactured safety here is the specific paradox at the center of the nice guy dynamic, and it is the one that makes the entire pattern so genuinely difficult to see from inside it. The nice guy has organized his entire presentation around the project of making women feel safe with him, safe from aggression, safe from disappointment, safe from the kind of male energy that has historically produced genuine harm. And the project of safety, in its deepest motivation, is not a bad one. The impulse comes from something genuinely decent, from a man who does not want to be the source of harm, who values the well-being of the people he cares about, who wants to be someone that people can trust and rely on and feel genuinely comfortable with. But safety, in the sense the nice guy is manufacturing it, is not what it appears to be. Because the kind of safety that eliminates all friction, all genuine edge, all sense of encountering something that has its own nature and its own limits, and its own genuine presence independent of your preferences, is not actually safety. It is a different kind of risk, the risk of a relationship with someone who is not quite real, the risk of a dependency on someone whose apparent availability is sustained not by genuine care, but by the inability to disappoint, the risk of an intimacy that never becomes intimate because the man on the other side has made himself entirely permeable to whatever the relationship requires and has therefore provided no genuine person for the intimacy to develop with. Genuine safety in a relationship is not the absence of a genuine person. It is the presence of a trustworthy one. And trustworthiness requires exactly what the nice guy's project of manufactured safety eliminates: a self that is real enough to have limits, honest enough to express them, and rooted enough to maintain them under pressure. A man who has no genuine limits cannot be genuinely trusted because his apparent availability is conditional on conditions you cannot fully identify and therefore cannot reliably account for. You do not know where the real man ends and the performance begins. You do not know what he actually thinks or actually feels or actually wants because he has made himself into whatever the moment seemed to require. And not knowing those things is not safety. It is a specific kind of uncertainty that feels, at a deep level, more unsettling than the honest presence of a man with genuine edges, who is also genuinely trustworthy in the ways that actually matter. Epictetus wrote about the impossibility of being genuinely useful to anyone while being genuinely nothing yourself. He meant it in the philosophical sense about the man who has no real values of his own. But the principle extends exactly here. The man who has no genuine self to offer, who has replaced the genuine self with a performance of consideration, cannot provide what he is trying to provide, cannot produce the safety he is engineering for, because the structure of genuine safety is built on genuine presence, and genuine presence is exactly what the performance eliminates. What integration actually produces? Let us be precise about what the alternative actually looks like. Because this video is not an argument for becoming aggressive or inconsiderate or deliberately difficult. Those are the shadow flooding the field without integration, and they produce a different set of problems that are equally rooted in the same failure to do the genuine work. The integrated man is not the opposite of the nice man. He is something more complex and more complete than either pole offers. The man who has done genuine shadow work, who has made honest contact with his anger and his aggression and his genuine selfishness and his full range of desire, and has brought those qualities into conscious relationship rather than continuing to suppress them, does not suddenly become someone who expresses all of those things without discernment or restraint. He becomes someone who has access to them. Who can draw on the forward-pressing energy of healthy aggression when the situation calls for it, and who does not need to when it doesn't? Who can express genuine desire without apology and without the tentativeness that converts desire into a request for permission? Who can disappoint and refuse and challenge and hold a position and create discomfort in service of what is true without being destroyed by the experience of having done so? Who has real limits and knows what they are and maintains them without drama, because they are actual limits and not performances of limits that will dissolve under sufficient pressure? This man has genuine warmth, genuine care, genuine consideration. But these qualities are expressions of surplus rather than performances of deficit. They come from a man who has enough, who is in contact with himself, who can extend genuine care because the extending of it does not require the suppression of everything else he actually is. His warmth has weight to it because it comes from a complete person rather than from the absence of one. His consideration has value because it is a choice made by a man with real alternatives rather than a compulsion, driven by the terror of what will happen to the connection if the consideration is ever withdrawn. Jung called the product of this integration individuation, the process of becoming undivided, of bringing into conscious relationship the full range of what a human being actually is, rather than selecting a portion of it for presentation and walling off the rest. The individuated man is not completed, not perfectly integrated, not free of ongoing difficulty and shadow material that continues to demand attention. But he is recognizably whole in a way that the man who has selected a portion and performs it as the total is not. And that wholeness, however imperfect, is exactly what the deepest structures of human attraction respond to, not because it is strategic, because it is real, and real is the only thing that actually satisfies what the deepest structures of human experience are reaching for, the anima as inner work rather than outer projection. Here is what changes when a man begins genuine shadow work, and it is what changes most fundamentally in the territory of intimate attraction. He begins to withdraw his projections, not all at once, not completely, because projection is a lifelong process that requires lifelong attention, but gradually, as he develops a more honest and more direct relationship with his own interior life, with his own emotional depth, his own intuitive intelligence, his own capacity for genuine feeling, the compulsive quality of his attraction begins to change. He stops relating to women as carriers of his anima projection and begins to relate to them as actual people, with their actual qualities and their actual limitations and their actual complexity. And that shift from projection to genuine perception transforms the quality of every interaction he has. The woman on the receiving end of genuine perception, of being seen as she actually is, rather than as the screen for someone else's interior projection, experiences something that is rare enough to be remarkable. Most men she encounters are relating to some version of her, filtered through their own psychological material. The nice guy is relating to his anima projection. The man with unintegrated aggression is relating to whatever his unresolved history with women has deposited over the image of her. The man whose mother wound is unexamined is relating to that wound as much as to the actual woman in front of him. To encounter a man who is actually seeing her, whose perception is clear enough and whose interior life is integrated enough that he can make genuine contact with who she actually is rather than who his projections require her to be, is to encounter something that is both rare and unmistakably real. And that experience of being genuinely perceived by a genuine person is one of the most powerful things any human being can offer another. This is the deepest dimension of what Jung was pointing at when he described the goal of masculine development as the integration of the anima rather than its projection. The man who has integrated his anima has, to the degree he has been able to do this work, recovered the emotional intelligence, the relational depth, the intuitive capacity that the masculine persona had suppressed. He is no longer dependent on women to carry those qualities for him, because he carries them himself. And because he carries them himself, because he is in genuine contact with that dimension of his own interior life, he can be genuinely present to the actual woman in front of him in a way that the projection-driven man cannot. He is not using her to complete something in himself. He is actually with her, and being actually with someone in the full sense of the word is what genuine intimacy is made of and what no performance of niceness, however sustained and however well-intentioned, has ever been able to substitute for. The women who stay with the nice guy, and why that is not the prize. He thinks it is. There is a version of this dynamic that requires honest naming, because it is the one the nice guy tends to point to as evidence that the analysis is wrong. He finds sometimes a woman who does choose him, who appreciates the accommodation and the consistency and the absence of friction, and who stays. And he understands this as confirmation that the strategy is working, that he has found someone who values what he is offering, that the nice guy, in this instance, does not finish last. But Jung's framework asks a more precise question about what has actually been found in that choosing, because the woman who chooses the nice guy specifically for his niceness, who is drawn to the absence of genuine friction and the absence of genuine edge and the absence of anything that would require her to encounter a complete and somewhat demanding human being, is often a woman who has her own shadow work that has not been done, who has her own reasons, rooted in her own history, to prefer a man whose genuine self has been suppressed in favor of a surface that generates no discomfort, who may be drawn to the dynamic not because it fulfills her, but because it is safe in the specific way her own psychological history has made safety feel necessary. This is not a criticism of such women. It is an honest description of what the pairing typically produces. Two people, each avoiding their genuine self in a relationship that is built around the avoidance. The nice guy suppresses his shadow in service of maintaining her approval. She suppresses her genuine desire for a complete man in service of maintaining the safety that his accommodation provides. The relationship is functional, it is often stable, and it produces in both people the specific long-term dissatisfaction of an arrangement that works by the avoidance of exactly what both of them actually need. The nice guy calls it a good relationship because it is friction-free, not understanding that the absence of friction is also the absence of the genuine encounter that makes a relationship genuinely nourishing. She stays and wonders over time why something is always slightly missing and cannot quite name it, because naming it would require acknowledging that what she chose, precisely for its safety, is not quite sufficient for the life she actually wanted. Genuine partnership in Jung's framework is between two people who are both doing the work of becoming more wholly themselves, who can bring genuine substance to the encounter and receive genuine substance in return, who create between them not a frictionless comfort, but a generative tension, the specific aliveness of two complete people actually meeting, actually affecting each other, actually growing through the encounter in ways that neither could manage alone. That kind of partnership is not built on niceness. It is built on presence, on the willingness of both people to be genuinely, sometimes uncomfortably, actually there, the Stoic dimension, virtue as the foundation or aurame. Everything this video has described through the Jungian framework maps directly onto something the Stoics had always understood about what genuine masculine development actually requires. Not the performance of virtue, not the management of behavior to produce the appearance of a good man, but the actual construction of character, the actual development of the inner qualities, clarity, courage, self-knowledge, the willingness to hold to what is true under pressure that constitute a man who is genuinely worth encountering rather than merely comfortable to be around. Marcus Aurelius was not building his character because it would make him attractive or successful or well-regarded, though the character he built produced all of those things as natural consequences. He was building it because he understood that character is the only thing a man actually has that is genuinely his own, that everything external, position, approval, comfort, the regard of others, is conditional on conditions he cannot fully control, and that the man who has built genuine internal substance, who has done the honest and difficult work of becoming actually good rather than performing goodness, has something that no change in external conditions can take from him. Epictetus said that no man who is not at home with himself can ever genuinely be at home with another person. The nice guy is not at home with himself. He is in flight from himself. He has built his entire external presentation around the project of making other people comfortable with him because he does not have access to the deeper security of a man who is comfortable with himself. And that flight, that absence of genuine self-inhabitation, is what the deepest structures of human attraction perceive and cannot choose. Not because those structures are punishing him for being kind, because those structures are responding to what is actually there, and what is actually there in the man whose niceness is a performance organized around the terror of his own genuine self, is less than what a complete human life actually requires. The Stoic path is not the path of the man who performs virtue. It is the path of the man who builds it, genuinely and continuously, and without the comfortable shortcuts that produce the appearance of development without the substance. That man is kind because he has developed genuine care, not because he is afraid of what happens if he isn't. He is patient because he has built genuine equanimity, not because he has suppressed the impatience that would reveal his actual limits. He is present because he is genuinely there, not because he has learned to perform presence in ways that the people around him find reassuring. And the difference between those two men, the one performing and the one becoming, is perceivable by anyone paying deep enough attention, including and perhaps especially in the most intimate contexts of human life. What the work actually is not a set of behaviors to adopt, not a performance to adjust. The actual work, which is more demanding than any strategic adjustment and more genuinely rewarding than any tactic could produce, is the work of making honest contact with yourself, with the parts of yourself you have suppressed, denied, walled off, organized against, with the anger that has been building beneath the agreeableness, with the desire that has been managed into tentativeness, with the forward-pressing energy you have been afraid to express because it might create discomfort or require you to occupy space you were not sure you were allowed to occupy, with the full dimensional reality of who you actually are beneath the careful performance of who you have decided it is safe to be. That work begins in private, in the honest examination of what you actually feel, what you actually want, what actually bothers you, what you would actually choose if the choosing were not filtered through the constant background question of whether the choice will be approved. It continues in the small daily practices of expressing what is genuine rather than what is comfortable, of saying the thing that is true rather than the thing that smooths, of holding the position that is actually yours, rather than adopting the position that generates the least friction, of disappointing people sometimes from a grounded place without the lengthy apology that converts honesty into another form of accommodation, of occupying the space your actual presence requires without continuously contracting yourself to make room for everyone else's comfort. And it extends over time into the fundamental reorganization of how you move through the world, not from aggressive to passive or from nice to difficult, but from performed to actual, from the man who is managing his presentation in every room he enters to the man who is simply there, in the full weight of what he actually is, without the management and without the constant adjustment and without the exhausting performance of a self that was never quite real enough to be worth the performance. That man finishes last in exactly nothing worth finishing, because what he builds in his relationships and in his work and in his own interior life is built on the only foundation that actually holds the weight of a genuine human life, himself as he actually is, without the apology and without the performance and without the terror of being found unacceptable that drove the nice guy to disappear behind his niceness in the first place. You are enough. Not the managed version of you, the actual one. And the work of this channel and the work of your life, if you are willing to do it honestly, is the work of finding out what that actually means.